3, 2, 1. Welcome back, friends, to our November the 5th special. Nick's back on, as he's our regular.
Hello.
I'm not going to burn myself this time like I did with Trinity. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about the Gunpowder Plot of 1605 on November 5th, better known as Guy Fawkes Plot, which is ironic, being he really...
Yeah, he had nothing to really...
Well, he did.
He literally, all he did was he was just an expert that they were like, hey, what's a good way to cause an explosion? He was like, this is what you need, this is how much gunpowder, this is where you should do it. Like, he was literally just a person of expertise that actually was like, yeah, I'm down to do that. I hate the king. No.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the real mastermind behind it was a man named Robert Catebsy, who was a reclusant, is what they were called. Catholics.
Recusant?
Recusant.
Yes.
I can't wait till they do something on the Protestants in France, the Huguenots. But he was a recusant who I believe was from Northern England. And what a recusant was a Catholic who lived in England. He was a Catholic nobleman, but he publicly practiced his religion, unlike other people who couldn't because they were either poor or didn't have the means to defend themselves. Catesby, unfortunately, would almost go bankrupt because of fines that he had to pay during the Elizabethan reign, because Queen Elizabeth came down hard on the Catholics, especially due to all the plots against her. What was the famous one called? They show it in both Elizabeth movies, which is why I hate those movies.
There's a lot of plots. She had a lot of enemies.
Well, you're the first legit Protestant monarch of England. That will happen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, she unfortunately had a lot of enemies.
She was an easy woman to hate, from what I've understood.
Yeah, she also did not make it easy for herself. A lot of her policies and her actions did not garner a lot of help in her.
Well, she also murdered another monarch.
That, and a very close monarch.
Well, family.
Yeah.
It was her cousin.
Pretty much. But, she did do good, though. She actually had a fantastic head of state who also...
Are you about to say this guy's name after we just smashed him 2 minutes before?
Well, okay, so...
You're not wrong. He was a good head of state.
William Cecil was a fantastic head of state, and he had a son. Well, he actually had two sons. He had a older son who ended up taking his title and all that stuff, and I believe he got the castle.
He got the lordship. That's usually how it worked.
But his younger son, who many would...
was a snake.
Yeah, he showed the best prominent features of a spy master, essentially, and the head of state.
Catholicism's really coming out right now.
He was a true fox.
Very true.
And he actually, Robert Cecil, first Earl of Salisbury, he played fantastically to everybody's advantage. He truly was a fantastic statesman.
Well, he started his term under Elizabeth. So
his father was getting sick, and he realized, hey, I need help. And, well, the oldest son, he's good at doing lordship stuff and other stuff, and he was perfectly fine with the ladies, but he realized you suck at spy masters. You're not that good at being a spy, and you're not good at, trying to worm your way through, the court and whatnot, and try and favor through people. But his youngest son, super good at it.
Well, before we go more into that, let's explain what the bomb plot was. So Catesby, along with other conspirators, including Thomas Percy, who was a distant cousin and employee of Henry Percy, the Earl of Northumberland.
Yep.
He had actually gone to Scotland before Queen Elizabeth passed away, because the heir apparent to the throne at the time was not a member of the House of Tudor, which Elizabeth was. He was actually a member of the House of Stuart, which is rooted actually from Robert the Bruce. A lot of people don't realize. His name was what?
No, I was gonna say the Scottish making their this little jab comeback at all the stuff.
My favorite thing about England is that they've never had an English monarch.
That's true.
Like,
technically, not a full-blooded English.
Well, even the first English monarch, William the Conqueror,
was
Norman. Then after the Plantagenets get wiped out, the Tudors were French.
Yep.
Then the Stuarts, who were Scottish.
Yep.
The Hanovers, who were Germans. The Saxe-Coburgs, who were Germans. And technically, the house in charge now is still the Saxe-Coburgs. It's just they changed the name to Windsor. But so Thomas Percy went to Scotland to visit James VI, who was the King of Scotland at the time, but he was also a distant cousin of Elizabeth. His mother was Mary Queen of Scots, who was actually a Catholic martyr, even though he himself was a Protestant. He went there to get some assurances that when he became king, he would not abuse the Catholics the way Elizabeth had.
It wasn't even so much that he would abuse the Catholics, that he would actually
leave them alone.
Not so much just even leave them alone, but actually like release a lot of the restrictions, because that's one of the big issues laws at the time, is that if you were Catholic, you were essentially fined for every aspect that they could fine you for. If you didn't go to a Protestant church, fine. If you didn't do any of the basic stuff, or if you tried to, celebrate any aspect of being a Catholic, you were fined. And that was if you were rich. If you were poor, it was you were pretty much ostracized.
Well, and that's where this idea of a recusant comes from, because they could be publicly Catholic, whereas the poor had to hide it or just comply and become Anglican. Yeah,
the benefit to being wealthy back in the day was you could be Catholic, fake being Protestant. So there was two different versions that you had. You had people who were Protestant on the outside but Catholic on the inside, and it was mostly so that they didn't really lose standing. However, a lot of those people were often viewed as essentially not true to the faith, and they were kind of looked down upon.
Kind of a coward. Then.
Yeah, it was considered a cowardly act. I mean, a lot of those people their families are still alive because of it, but a lot of their honor has kind of been stained from it. And then you have the people who were openly, no, I still profess the faith of Catholicism and all that stuff. I still do my mass. It's like, okay, well, that's a pretty bold statement, and
especially in this kind of world.
Yeah, and especially at the time, because at the time you had Spain, who was a Catholic nation,
and they were the defenders of the English Catholics.
Yep, and they were at war with England, and essentially was viewed, oh, you're Catholic, you are now A, possibly a spy, B, possibly a heretic, and C, possibly an enemy that we don't know if you're actually going to attack.
An enemy from within.
Yeah, so it was very tumultuous times, unfortunately, for Catholicism.
So James assured Thomas Percy. Well, he didn't, though.
No,
he was a very smart politician, James the Sixth of Scotland, first of England. He was clever. He played it everything would be fine.
I'm on the board the train that he was more of a fool. Like he was educated and he was smart, but at the same time he was just enough where he could kind of like. I think he would confuse people just enough with the smart talk that it's like, yeah, I think that Catholics should be freed for this certain aspect, but he wouldn't go into depth, which is the smart thing to do. So yes,
he never actually made promises.
Oh yeah, no, he
was just like, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Like
he was smart. He never made promises. He just made suggestions, or he made statements saying, I think it would be better if they weren't persecuted. No, he didn't really say that, but
no, essentially he'd be like, oh, it's horrible.
Yeah,
what's going on? Like, oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, he made he made statements that had no particular sides, where he could literally just be like, well, I didn't say that. I meant this. Or, you can easily He was pretty
much saying read between the lines, even though I'm not actually saying anything between the lines.
Yeah.
That's what,
it was the smartest thing to do.
He's clever. He was a clever politician in that aspect.
Because you don't want to ostracize yourself from the Protestants who were the majority. I believe it was like...
It's like 85%.
Yeah, you're in a country that is almost completely Protestant. You do have your Catholic holdovers, but it's been almost a century or two.
Most of the Catholics were in English holding lands were in Ireland.
Yeah.
So they really didn't care because they're over there. They'll just persecute them with their armies.
Yeah, which, I mean, English history, Irish people aren't real people.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Nick.
As an Irish person, I appreciate the statement. But in the country...
We're animals, apparently.
But according to the English Empire and to the British, kingdom, Irish people weren't real people, and for the most part, they were on their own little island, so they didn't really have to worry too much about them over there. but you still had the Catholic holdouts on the mainland, and for the most part, it was you don't want to upset the Protestants, who are the majority, but you also don't really want to kind of annoy the Catholics. You kind of just want to like pretend that they don't exist because it's easier that way. And I mean, you as a ruler and a monarch, you have more things that you need to focus on. You need to focus on, you know, trying to get taxes, because the problem with James the Sixth was that he was awful at like basic finance.
Oh, he had to trust his advisors. He couldn't do anything on his own.
I believe that his kingdom was not doing that fantastic. Like, and the problem is he had a small kingdom, and the moment he jumps over into the actual, you know, British kingdom.
Well, this is one of these weird situations where you have a king who's the king of a whole separate kingdom. Now, not only is he king of that kingdom, but now he exhumes a much bigger kingdom under his control as well. So, and it's also a multicultural kingdom if you think about it, because, okay, let's remove the Irish, because at this point, the way the Irish view themselves are as occupied, and the English don't view them as people. Yeah. But you have the Welsh,
and also it honestly is its own separate entity.
Oh, it's its whole own geopolitical situation.
Whereas Scotland and the UK, it's all on one land piece.
Well, it's because of the Stuarts that you have the Acts of Union in the late 1700s.
Yep.
Because the Stuarts under, I believe, Queen Anne, I think it was. She's the last Stuart king. That's why if you look at the British flag, it's back then.
Yeah.
It looks the way it did because it's the cross of St. George with the blue of Scotland.
Yep.
Obviously, the Acts of Union that would go on again in the late 1700s, again under George III, that one is where Ireland gets pulled into it.
Yeah.
Because before that, it was king and queen of the United Kingdom and Ireland, and Kingdom of Ireland.
Yeah.
And then it became the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Scotland, and Ireland.
Yeah.
But so before we go off, so Queen Elizabeth dies in June, I believe. Let me double check that. No, I'm sorry. March of 1603.
Yep.
James is declared King of England. So now he's James the Sixth of Scotland and James the First of England. He takes the throne, and this is where we meet our friend Robert Cecil, who was already serving on the Queen's cabinet, and now he's moved himself over to be a counselor in the King's cabinet.
Yep.
And all he keeps doing is reminding the king, these Catholics are dangerous. These Catholics are dangerous. Think of what they're going to do. Think, pulling on the king's heartstrings, being like, look what they did to your father.
Which was also kind of risky on his situation, because his wife, James the First's wife, was Catholic.
Well, think about his son.
And yeah,
Charles the First's wife, Henrietta, was the Catholic princess of France.
Like, a lot of people, I think some people don't realize, it's like, that's kind of bold to be like, hey, these Catholics, they're dangerous, which also means technically your wife is dangerous.
Well, I think that's why it's very commonly believed, because, we've talked about this, how he's the inspiration for Richard III.
Yeah.
But also, well, not Richard III, like the actual Richard III.
So,
like Shakespeare's Richard III.
Yes. So at the same time as all of this is going down, you also have William Shakespeare, who...
trying to kiss the Stuarts and Tudors' butts.
So there's actually many things with the whole William Shakespeare situation, but if going according to the history,
we're not going into the freaking the
ghost.
Yeah, we're not going into the ghost writers. Let's just talk about him.
At the time, William Shakespeare is currently writing plays and doing things, and one of those things like he's doing is essentially propaganda for back in the day, and he's also doing reflections of how their life was at the time, where it's like, and Richard III was, yes, it was based on Richard III, but it was also a jab at this whole situation with King James and Robert Cecil, and a lot of the features, because Richard III wasn't that crippled that they...
No, he was...
Yeah.
Richard III gets a very bad rep. Richard III actually was a very good warrior. He was actually very...
And the thing is Robert Cecil was. And there's many parts where they're like, it's clear, it's a clear jab at either Richard III or James I, and it's one of those things that you currently have propaganda, and that was another aspect that Robert Cecil, he actually was trying to pump out propaganda, and he was trying to pump out plays as well to try and combat that, because it's like, hey, I'm in charge of a majority.
Well, before Queen Elizabeth died, Robert Cecil tried to shut down the World Theater, and she stopped it. She's like, "You're not shutting it down," and he's like, "Of course, you know, because he's a coward at the end of the day that uses muscle to defend himself." But so James takes the throne. Robert Cecil convinces him because again, we don't know what James's thoughts were entering the throne. For all we know, maybe he was going to come in and and he did for a period.
Well, he did for the first year. The first year, he was pretty moderate and lenient per se. He eased up on a lot of the recusant fines, which a lot of people were thankful for. But the problem is you don't have to pay a fine, but it's still pretty risky.
And you're also still being looked down on by everyone.
Yeah, and in many aspects, you're still not technically a full citizen because, well, you're a heretic, clearly. And then also, at the same time, James is trying to. He has many good ideas. He was a very smart man, and he actually had some good ideas. The problem is, good ideas in your head do not always translate to good ideas in real life.
Well, and one of his biggest things, which is pretty much what sets the ball in motion here, is his idea that he wants to end the war with Spain. Yes. He's done fighting this war. He knows tax-wise, even with the fines on the Catholics, the taxes are brutal because they have to keep these armies and navies up, and he just wants to end it. And now this is where we start getting into the bomb plot. After that year of peace, he enacts fines and everything again under Cecil's direction, telling him it's the good idea to keep the Catholics in check.
Well, at the same time, like I said earlier, James was not good financially. He never really thought about those things, and he never really had to worry too much because up north, he didn't really... He was kind of in debt at certain points, but at the same time, the way he could balance away and get away with it, it wasn't that big of a deal. The problem with the UK, well, problem with Great Britain at the time when he moved in, is he was also a people pleaser. And a people pleaser in government is not good because it usually leads to more bureaucracy. And at the time,
I think he made all the departments they have today.
He is the reason why the government in Britain exploded, and he made such massive, large. Literally at the time, he helped a boom essentially for the whole entire city of London because he was just like, yeah, we're gonna have this department, this department, this department.
Well, if you think about it, you know, I you've been to London, right?
No, I have not.
Well, so I've been to London a few times. If you look, even, you know, let's remove the Blitz and everything. Mm-hmm. Before James takes the throne, the government is run out of the Palace of Westminster.
Yep.
Which it's really a royal palace with two wings devoted to government. So you have the House of Lords and the House of Commons, which are just two random wings.
Yeah.
When he takes over, because London is full of palaces.
Yeah.
Because you know, you have the St. James Palace, you have Westminster. You know, I know technically Windsor Castle is not part of London, but it's outside of London. There's hundreds of palaces in London.
Yeah.
He starts allocating all of these buildings to the government now.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I don't want to live in them anyway, so just give them to the government. Let them use them.
And not only that, but now that he's introduced in a lot more jobs, well, you know, when you do new jobs in places, you got to have new live-in quarters and new servants' quarters. And so a lot of that starts to explode. And at the time, you also had the house, which I mean, we've both seen the documentaries of the house at the time. It wasn't the same, you know, the same house that they have now.
Not at all. Not even close.
Yeah, it was like super small.
It was probably the size of this house, to be completely honest.
Yeah, it was literally probably at most, I believe, 100 feet long.
Also think about the population back then.
Yeah.
They didn't need as many seats.
But
you're right.
Yeah, it was not that big of a building. It was big, but it wasn't that big. It was, I believe, 2 stories at most?
I don't think it was 2 stories. I think it technically was 2 stories, but it was just a lifted roof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, so he starts putting in laws. Now all the Catholics feel betrayed. The recusants feel betrayed. They're like...
And because of the new laws and because of the new bureaucracy, he's trying to recover the money. So Robert Cecil gets in his ears and goes, hey, we need money. We need money now. And so he tries to, you know, he gets in James I's ear and says, bring back those fines because, hey, it didn't really do that much damage, and at the same time, we can get the money back. Yeah. And he's like, okay, fine.
Well, so just to add on to that, at that time, Cecil was also the keeper of the Privy Seal.
Yeah.
Which kind of is the money guy, at some sense. Like, there's a Lord High Treasurer, but he also is the Lord of the Privy Seal, so James has to listen to him.
Yeah.
And being he's from Scotland and he doesn't really know England and how it all works, he has to trust these guys because he doesn't know. Like, of course, he brings his Scottish courtiers with him to England, but he still doesn't know the customs.
Which is funny in another aspect that he actually tried to do. So what a lot of people didn't realize is England and Scotland had two totally separate laws and legal systems.
That he ruled over both. And during his tenure, he actually tried to unify and create an actual, kingdom.
Yeah,
a united
an
kingdom.
actual super kingdom. And he also tried to have a whole entire court that was both Scotland and England. And the problem with that, which it also helped lead further to
this ripples to this day.
Yeah, which it was, okay, well, who's going to give up their powers? Because it's one of those situations where it's like, okay, someone has to give, and the problem is well, the Scots didn't want to give up anything, and the Brits didn't want to give up anything.
Well, and this is something I think a lot of people need to realize about this era. These are two completely separate countries.
Yeah.
This would be like France asking him to be the king of France and the king of England.
Yep.
Like, this isn't, they're a puppet kingdom. Scotland at this time is its own country. Like, they don't adhere to the British monarch.
Yep.
The only reason they're adhering to the British monarch is because the British monarch is technically their monarch.
Yep.
But so with all the laws rescinded and everything, and the taxes and everything, and the fines being upped, people
started getting upset,
especially the Catholics,
and not just the normal Catholics. The normal Catholics, they were getting upset, but they were used to it at this point, so it wasn't really anything different. Which at the time it sucked, but literally, like I said, there wasn't really anything different.
Yeah.
But it was the extremists and fanatics.
Well, and people like Thomas Percy, who
Yes.
Thomas Percy, as I said before, he was the one who had gone to Scotland and left that meeting thinking, oh, this guy said he was going to not be doing this.
And at this time, because he's like, well, he eased up the fines, and this was before him bringing back the taxes. He eased up the fines and the taxes. Okay, cool. What else is he going to do next? And after that whole first year period, he's like, okay, so he's not doing anything for us.
No. And aristocratic Catholics, who are the ones that led the bomb plot, felt betrayed. They felt like a promise was made and it was not being kept. Which, again, like we said, no promise was technically ever made. Yeah, no. He played a very good...
He literally just talked right out of his
It's like that scene in Lincoln where they're like, are there Confederate ambassadors here? And Lincoln responds, to my knowledge, there are no Confederate ambassadors in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
Technically, he's not lying because they're not in the city. And what was Pemberton say? He's like, it's a lawyer's trick.
Yeah.
He was a good lawyer. That's what James was a very good lawyer. Yeah. But, so pretty much, Catesby rounds up all these recusants, extremists, and he reaches out to, was his name William Stanley? The Englishman in the Spanish Netherlands, which is today Belgium, that's where the English Catholics went for refuge.
No, it was Thomas Winter who introduced Guy Fawkes to.
No, but who was the one? There was a Catholic leader in the Netherlands. He was the one that led the recusants. I forgot his name.
Yeah.
William Stanley, I think it was his name.
But yeah, and there was. I'm trying to remember his name too. Were you able to find it?
Yeah, right here, Sir William Stanley.
Oh, yeah.
So William Stanley was he led the Catholics in what we call the Spanish Netherlands, which is Belgium, because that's where a high amount of Catholics were because of the Spanish.
And on top of that, just to add to that, a lot of people, so if you were poor and you were Catholic and you were a guy, at the time, the best thing for you to do was to essentially go to Spanish Netherlands and join the Spanish army, because one, you get experience, you get money,
very much,
and you actually had people who you could embrace with because they were brothers in arms and brothers in the faith. And also you could get contacts, and if you want to, you could just kind of leave England, because
this plays into the whole European religious wars.
Yes.
Which were huge.
Yes.
You know, I think that's where you get Gustavus Adolphus with Sweden, bringing the Protestantism into Sweden. Louis XIV expelling the Huguenot. Well, I think it was actually Louis XIII that first expelled them, and then Louis XIV continued it. Yeah. But so pretty much what happens is they go to Spain first, to the Constable of Castile, and asks for an army to invade England and remove James and the Protestants and kill James.
Yep.
The Spanish say, we can't kill a ordained king.
Yeah.
And to which the Catholics respond, he's not ordained. We asked him to come from Scotland here, so technically he's not ordained. But the Pope had made a papal bull saying you cannot kill a monarch regardless of belief, which is so funny because the Pope was the one that actually said to kill Elizabeth.
Yes. But the Pope also, he worded it specifically because he didn't want it to bite the Catholic monarchs.
Well, he didn't want them
in the
getting,
butt.
yeah.
Because it was also angled at, because they were still trying to kind of, persuade them to come back to the faith without fully, cutting off that hand. Because if you say, if you're not a Catholic monarch, you're not a real monarch and you can instantly just get killed by people. First of all, that leads to trouble down the road, and it's hard to, reconcile that.
Well, because all you have to say is he's not actually a Catholic.
Yeah.
And kill him.
Yeah. So they made, the Catholic Pope at the time made it very clear, and he was like, you can not kill a monarch that is appointed by, I believe, like, it was very weasel.
It's a very lawyer.
Yeah.
You could tell it was written out by lawyers.
Yeah.
How well it was, because it was something like if they're ordained with like holy oil or some stupid thing like that.
It was specific. If it was specifically worded to read between the lines, and you can kill your king, but you can't kill your king if they're on our side.
Yeah.
But I mean that was the thing with everybody at the time.
Yeah. But pretty much Spain said no, because Spain was also exhausted of the war,
and they just got peace, and they didn't feel like starting it all back over.
Remember, like 20 years earlier or 30 years earlier was the Spanish Armada, and that literally crippled the Spanish military because they lost so many men and so many ships.
Yeah, and they had way too many other things that they had to worry about. They had to worry about their fleet. They had to worry about their colonies. Holdings.
So Spain says no.
Yeah.
Then they go to William Stanley in the Spanish Netherlands, and he says, we'll support you, and we will bring our army of recusants back to England to help you seize power only when James is dead.
Yep.
And there's someone to put in power to replace him. So Robert Catesby, Thomas Percy, Tom Winter, what the frig was his name? Wintour?
Thomas Winter, yeah.
Yeah, Thomas Winter, and a few other people come together. Winter is the one who brings in Guy Fawkes, who is serving in the Spanish Netherlands, but he's actually from Northern England. Yeah. But he goes by the name
Guido
Fawkes, and because Guido is Spanish for Guy.
Yeah.
And they take up residence in London. Mm-hmm. The plan is that on the opening of Parliament in the spring originally, they're going to put gunpowder under the House of Lords, which is where all houses meet for the opening of Parliament. Even today they do that. Yeah. And blow it up and kill the king, councillors, Prince Charles at the time, ironic, the House of Commons, which among them is actually a very famous writer, philosopher, I believe.
Yes, it was,
what was his name?
Tip of my tongue.
I feel stupid because I'm going to see his name. Francis Bacon.
Yes, Francis Bacon.
Francis Bacon's a member of the House of Commons.
Yes.
So that's the plan, but...
And actually what a lot of people don't realize is they're also going to kill some Catholics, because there is Catholics in the House of Commons and Lords.
Well, yeah.
And at the time, their thought process was, well, it's okay because they're Catholic and they're going to go to heaven, and the rest will go to hell because that's where the heretics belong.
And to add to this, you have the Earl of Northumbria, who's Thomas Percy's second cousin, Henry Percy, he's a Catholic sympathizer, but he's not a Catholic.
Yeah.
But also you have the Jesuit High Priest of England. Was his first name? I know his last name was Garnet.
Yeah, Garnet. I think it was Henry Garnet.
Henry Garnet,
I believe.
Actually was speaking out against it. He didn't support it. He said, you need the faith to come back peacefully. But, again, this is a group of angry young men who are sick of being abused, sick of being lied to, and they want justice.
Well, one of the things that they actually think is that Henry Garnet didn't actually fully know. He knew that there was going to be a plot.
He knew something was going to happen.
He knew that they were trying to do something to force the king's hand. The problem is he didn't fully know what. And what's funny is throughout the whole entire time, he actually was pleading with them, guys, don't do this.
Yeah, things are hard enough.
And not only that, he actually had written to the Pope and asked him to tell them, hey, don't do this. And that was one of those things where the Pope actually said, hey, you can't kill your...
Garnet's kind of responsible for it.
Yeah.
The Jesuit order actually kind of gets founded in this era. Because the Jesuits were originally to go into England and teach. You know, Jesuits obviously are an order to this day. Jesuit priests and monks and things still exist. But so, Parliament gets canceled because what happens, because James... his expansion of London causes illness.
Yep.
And there's a plague, not the plague, but an illness hits the city.
There's an illness. People also have to realize that during the wintertime and the colder months, it's one of those things. People get the flu, and it's like nowadays it's flu season. Back then it was plague season, and so people died. And it's like, okay, guys, we're just gonna chill where we are. We'll come back. Literally, it was essentially a mini COVID shutdown.
Yes,
for them back in the day.
That's the best way to put it. It was like actually 15 days, 2 weeks. 2 weeks is
2 weeks to slow the spread.
But so pretty much, London shuts down. Obviously, they don't evacuate the city or anything. Just the government doesn't meet.
Yeah, no. The people that are there, that's fine, because at this point they're either going to die anyways.
Well, they're used to it. This happens every year.
Yeah,
there's always a sickness that breaks out.
It's one of those things, but their thought process was, we're not going to, increase the population because that'll increase the plague.
Or risk the lords and things like that to get sick. Or the king.
Yeah, especially with his kids. He was like, I'm not going to do that.
So, they move it to November, the opening of Parliament.
Yep.
Which I think it still is. Is that when? No, because it would have they were already announced the opening.
I don't know.
If it was going to be in November. I think it is still in the spring. But, so pretty much, the whole... way this plan was going to succeed, in quotes, is secrecy.
Yep.
This is where Robert Catesby makes a big mistake. He starts recruiting Catholics in the countryside throughout the summer. Now, if you want a bomb plot to work, a plot like this, you don't want a lot of people knowing about it.
That, and also you want to have a dead set, like
plan.
Not just a plan, but you want a set date, because at the same time, their plan was to use gunpowder. And if a lot of people don't realize is that gunpowder, it's not like modern day explosive powder, or the smokeless powder, where today, I mean, as long as it's kept in a safe, dark, or not a dry area, it's good for a long time. Back in the day, gunpowder, it was very susceptible to getting damp, and if it got damp,
it was useless.
It's not so much that it was useless, it was unpredictably useless.
Yeah.
Because it could go up or it could not go up. It literally was just unpredictable, and it was hard to calculate if it would work. Yeah. And the problem is they worked with 30. Guy Fawkes had come up with a plan, and his thought process was, okay, we need 36 barrels. And the whole reason behind that was because he wanted to make sure that it would actually cause enough damage to actually kill everybody, because there was other plots in history where, okay, it wasn't enough to do the actual damage.
Well, that's like the Valkyrie bomb plot. They had 2 bombs,
but
they decided not to do the second one because they needed to get out as quick as possible, and that backfired on them because that's how Hitler survived.
Yeah, and that's another thing, that the old house that they were going to be meeting in, or the House of Commons and the House of Lords were meeting in, the basement where they actually stored all the firewood.
Well, it's interesting because the basement didn't actually belong to Parliament or the government. It was actually a private residence that went under Parliament.
But it was one of those things where it was actually a very strong, thick concrete, and if you don't realize, I mean, essentially it created a shaped charge that would direct all the blast energy up, which at that point you're going to kill everybody. So
yeah, and then even after the blast, the building's going to cave in on itself.
Yeah.
So no one's leaving the room.
Yeah. No one is going anywhere except up.
Yeah.
And that's if they're unlucky.
Yeah.
If they're lucky, they're gone in a second just from the sheer blast. And
in that Richard Hammond documentary we were watching, I heard someone say it'd be like the equivalent of a nuke.
Yes,
like if you're in the immediate blast, you're just eviscerated.
It was a nuke in proportions to the era, because at that point a gunpowder barrel was equivalent to literally a Moab, because I mean it was
the damage it could do.
Yeah, the damage it could do was just insane.
Well, look at the siege of Vienna. That's how the Janissaries were taking down the walls. They were just putting barrels under the walls, and sappers were collapsing the walls.
Which Guy Fawkes
was a sapper.
he was a sapper. He was a siege engineer and an explosive expert. So his whole entire purpose was literally being utilized to the extreme here.
Like he like, you know, earlier we said he wasn't really the mastermind, but he was an important aspect of this plan.
100%. If it wasn't for him, they wouldn't fully really know what to do with it.
If it wasn't for him, they would have charged him with swords and tried to stab everyone, for all we know.
No, I think they would have still tried to go with the gunpowder barrel, but the problem is they probably would have gone with the wrong type of gunpowder.
And not enough. Yeah.
Which, if the smarter thing that they could have done would be to do that, and then to bar the doors and windows so that they couldn't escape, and hopefully they just burned it.
Well, again, if the king's in there, no one's gonna. Like, I agree, but I'm saying if the king's in there, no one's going to leave anyway, because it's pretty much kiss his butt the entire time.
Yeah.
But so, Robert goes into the north. He starts recruiting Catholics, but now a lot of people are knowing about what is going to happen. He makes an oath of secrecy, but people are in secret.
All the Catholic circles at the time, everybody knows that something big is going on, and they're kind of all talking, going, "Yeah, we're gonna get our vengeance soon." And the problem is the smart people who realize that they're a minority in the country are like, "This is dangerous. Probably shouldn't really be doing that stuff." And then you have the other people who are fanatics at this point who are like, "No, we need to do the change, because if not,
it has to.
It has to happen."
It's pretty much we're done.
We can't do this anymore. It's making its way into the circles. And earlier, when Queen Elizabeth was still alive, there was another actual rebellion called the Sussex Rebellion, I believe it was. Give me 1 second to actually look it up. It was the...
You know what's something I always find...
No, it was the Essex Rebellion. Yeah. Sorry, I always get that.
Well,
confused.
They sound the same.
I know. And it was done by Robert Deveau, the second Earl of Essex. And a lot of the same actors in that rebellion are present again.
Yeah.
Catesby, he was technically in that group. He helped, and he also tried to do some of the stuff. Like, a lot of these people, Catesby and Percy, they were both actually known by Robert Cecil at the time.
Well, Cecil was looking for any excuse to arrest them.
Oh, yeah. But at the same time, this also led to one of the conspiracy theories that Robert Cecil knew about this from the beginning.
Oh, that was an age problem. Let's finish the timeline, and then we'll go into that. But so, pretty much, now we're getting into the fall, and... Catesby and all of them sit together, and they're like, "We're doing it. The new date's been announced. It's going to be November the 6th.
Yep.
Will be the day Parliament meets." So, they put the gunpowder, set it up. The house was owned by Thomas Percy on behalf of the Earl of Northumbria, his second cousin, Henry Percy. Again, there's no evidence the Earl knew.
Well, they were renting the basement
from him.
And which, to be fair, was also, he was, I believe, actually no, I don't think it was the Earl of Northumbria. I believe it was someone else. And also, it's one of those
was someone in his service, though. Because that's what helped make it like, wait a minute. It's because the conspirators' idea was he was a safe person to hide behind because the king trusted him. So, because it was Thomas Percy who rented it. It was rented in Thomas Percy's name.
Yes. And it was actually one of Robert Cecil's close friends who rented it to them, and he actually after the whole bomb plot and situation, he was actually worried for the longest time. But Robert Cecil was like, "No, you're good. You had nothing to do with it."
But so what the plan was, the majority of the conspirators left London that night, except for Thomas Winter and Fawkes. Fawkes was to stay in the house, and then early in the next day, when Parliament met, set off the bomb, and then flee with Winter and join the other conspirators, where they would conveniently find James's daughter Elizabeth, declare her the new queen, and install Henry Percy as the regent.
Yeah, essentially they were gonna use her as a puppet and
puppet monarch.
Yeah, puppet monarch, and essentially fix everything and convert it all back to Catholicism, the one true faith.
So everything is going according to plan, but someone sent a letter to one of the lords. Pretty much, it's kind of that person in a school thing where it's like, don't make sure you wear a red sweater tomorrow or something. He pretty much sent a letter that said, don't go to Parliament tomorrow, to a member of Parliament.
And it was actually, the letter itself was worded
very strange.
Dear brother in the faith, James the First will have a blow tomorrow, a great blow to the king, and to the false, or to the heretics.
Yeah, something like that. And that they would never see their assassins.
Yes, they would never see their assassins. It was actually delivered to, I believe it was...
It was William... He was the...
Montague or Montague...
No, that's a different... It was... What the frick was his name? He was the Lord Marshal of the Tower.
He was actually... So, when Parliament got pushed back, they actually had to bring in more people because they had to... They were running low on funds.
William Wade.
Sir
William Wade.
And he was actually the...
Lieutenant of the Tower. He worked for Cecil.
Well, that, and also he was close... I believe he was the brother-in-law to one of the conspirators. And they actually... The conspirators,
that sounds right, yeah.
They found out about the letter, too. And they had freaked out and started essentially threatening, Did you tell? And he's like, no, I didn't say nothing. I didn't write a letter. And it was one of those things where it's like, okay... They didn't trust him, but at the same time...
What can you do?
Yeah, and the stupidest thing, what they should have done is they should have just stopped and come up with a new plan and just, cut their losses. But they refused to at this point because, I mean...
The die was cast.
Yeah.
And the die was cast. There was no stopping what was going on.
Yeah.
So, pretty much, William Wade brings this letter to his boss, Robert Cecil. Cecil then sends soldiers to this property.
Well... Technically, they actually didn't do anything for a whole week, and Robert Cecil was like, "Thank you for bringing me this letter. I'll look into it." And so this is where one of the conspiracy theories comes in. Goes Robert Cecil knew about the letter beforehand because he was the one who actually wrote it. But that's a different part. We'll just go off of the main story for now, which is he didn't understand the letter, and so. He waited for King James to come back
Which
from
is
the hunting.
Very BS considering how smart he was.
Yeah, Robert Cecil was a very intelligent
He was actually
person.
He was probably one of the smarter people in England at the time.
Yeah, he was a very sly fox who knew exactly what that letter meant.
Yeah.
But he was a sly fox, and he knew the best way to favor more curry with the king, and because...
Have him discover it.
Have him figure it out, because at this time, James the First was trying to... combine the countries. He was trying to combine Scotland and the UK.
Bring peace
or Great Britain.
Between Spain and England.
And he was trying to do all these things. And there was certain bits and times when Robert Cecil would lose favor and gain favor with back and forth. And he always wanted to try and maintain a good, positive relationship with the king so that way he could try and influence him. And the best way to do it was literally be like, oh, I could figure this out. Maybe you can figure this out. And it's one of those things where, he gained favor because he made the king feel smart. Yeah.
So, on November the 5th, Cecil finally orders William Wade to send soldiers to the Percy residence.
Yes.
And
they technically didn't find anything the first time.
Well, that's true. They get there, and they find a man named John Johnson, who's actually Guy Fawkes, or Guido Fawkes. sitting there cutting wood.
And not just cutting wood, because it was a wood storage, but the wood amount was insane.
Yeah, there was no reason to have that much.
Yeah, it was like, okay, it would be like having like, so I used to live in a house that had a wood stove, and I had about 10 to 12 things of wood. I'd have piles. That's an average amount for the wintertime. Now, a house that big, probably, I don't know how much wood they would have, but it wouldn't be that crazy amount. But they had so much piles of wood, but it was because it was covering the barrels of gunpowder. Yeah. And not only that, but he was also in his boots, and he was in full-on gear. And,
it looked like he was going somewhere.
Yeah, and at the time, if you're doing stuff with if you're cutting the firewood for the house or for the main manor, you'd just be dressed in your indoor clothes, which is completely different attire, and not wearing boots.
You wouldn't be wearing boots. You wouldn't be wearing a coat. You'd be just in regular clothes.
Yeah,
you wouldn't look like you're about to go traveling.
Yeah, and not just traveling, but like high-speed traveling.
So pretty much what happens is the soldiers originally go, they take the excuse and they start walking away, and then William Wade arrives and he says, "What's going on?" And they say, "Oh, well, we checked and there's nothing there." And he's like, "Oh, well, who owns the house?" And they go, "Oh, Thomas Percy. He rents it."
Yeah.
And then he goes, "Who?" And they go, "Thomas Percy." And then he goes, "Go back in there."
Because Thomas Percy was an avowed Catholic
and a known,
and he was also part of the earlier Essex Rebellion, and they knew, hey, this guy's an extremist renting a house right next to Parliament,
where we know someone's trying to do something.
Clearly, putting two and two together, and so they went back.
So they go back and they demand entry into the basement, and I don't even think it was Fawkes that let them in. I think it was the landlady.
Yeah,
she opened the door for the soldiers, and Fawkes was down in the cellar because he was supposed to be setting off the bomb.
Yeah, so at that time he was trying to adjust the fuse. I think he was trying to either adjust the fuse or he was prepping it. Yeah, he was prepping it, and it was an 8-hour slope fuse. So for those of you who don't know, when you light gunpowder, you have to have a fuse, and you can have long fuses that go for hours, or you can have quick fuses. His was going to be an 8-hour fuse, and it was because, technically, I think it was supposed to be.
It was supposed to be shorter.
He had a 16-hour fuse, I believe.
Well, he wanted to do it, but then he realized how damp it was down there, so he wanted to make sure it was set off correctly.
Yeah.
Before he left,
and so he was trying to adjust it because the original plan was for him to actually wait for a couple hours, watch it go off from a safe distance, but ensure that everyone
was killed.
Yeah, and then he would meet up
with the other conspirators.
Yes, but yeah, and they caught him literally red-handed in the act.
He literally was holding the fuse. He also pulled a sword on them.
Yes,
which, no offense, I don't care how good a soldier you are. You're facing like 30 guards in full plate armor running in and arresting you. You're not winning that. Yeah. You're not winning that fight.
Especially if they have halberds or pikes.
Yeah. So he's arrested. He's brought to the tower where he's tortured. They find out his real name.
Yep.
Because this whole time he's referring to himself as John Johnston.
He actually held up for a couple days.
Yeah, they
until they brought out the infamous rack. And I believe there's been many historians said that no one really has ever really survived the rack through the torture, except for like 2 people.
Because you feel your literal bones.
Your bones are literally popping, and all your joints are literally being stretched to the.
Remember that Persian one where they would tie you to donkeys?
Oh,
your limbs and make them go in separate directions.
Well, the Huns did that too. They did it with horses where each limb would be attached to a horse, and all the horses would be whipped.
Well, so finally, after hours of torture, they bring him before the king because, again, Cecil wants to gain favor with the king, and he says...
Well, that, and also the king actually requested it because the king...
Well, he wanted to look at him. He wanted to see them.
Well, so the king is also a very religious, and so before he actually, not before he was king, but when he was king in Scotland, he actually was also, you could consider him essentially a religious... professor, essentially, I believe he was a professor, actually, technically.
I think he was taught in theology.
Yeah.
I don't know if he gained a PhD. I know he was very...
Well, he essentially was a...
Well, he wrote the King James Bible.
Yeah. And not only that, but like I said, he essentially was a religious professor, and he also liked the dramatic flares and stuff of trying to, meet, his assassins face to face. And this is technically, I think, the third assassination on his life, because there was one.
Well, there was one when he was young.
Yeah, and then there was one when he was a man, and it was funny because that one, the only reason he actually escaped it, because he didn't really actually escape. He actually grabbed the assassin, put him in a headlock, and then just started screaming at the top of his lungs until someone came and was like, "Oh, this assassin."
I think this one affected him badly though, because
Yes.
those were only ever on him.
Yes.
This one was going to not only kill him, but it was going to kill his children, his wife,
and the innocents. And, and he actually had made a statement onto that to Guy Fawkes. He's like, "You would kill the children, the innocents, children," and Guy Fawkes literally was like, "Well, you're all heretics who deserve death, so yeah."
Yeah, well, it's crazy too, because that Richard Hammond thing we watched about like the bomb plot, the blast would have done damage. Like it wasn't just going to be Westminster that was affected. It was going to be civilians.
The blast would have taken out, if anything, Westminster, and on top of that, almost all the surrounding buildings. And and if it didn't just destroy them, the fire itself would probably have killed people. The
stained glass of Westminster Abbey would have been shattered.
Oh yeah,
just because of the pulse of the explosion.
It would have caused shrapnel and fragmentation pieces for at least a good distance.
I think they would have even felt it across the Thames.
Oh yeah, hands down, they would have felt that.
So after the rack, Fawkes finally admits to everything that happened.
Yep.
And at this point, Catesby, Wintour, and Percy have all fled to Staffordshire, where they're holding up in a place called the Holbeck House. Now, at the Holbeck House, their powder got wet. So some idiot suggested to dry it next to a fire.
So this is another actual conspiracy theory, is that I believe it was Percy who he realized everything has gone to shit. And excuse my language, but
I knew you were gonna curse. I had a 2.5 hour podcast with a comedian, and she didn't curse once. We haven't even hit an hour. You've already cursed.
Sorry. So everything has essentially gone to the wayside and gone bad in every aspect. So they decide, or the conspiracy is that Thomas Percy has realized, well, my life's ruined. Might as well take out everybody, like all the plotters with me, and we can at least go to heaven.
Because they weren't going to kill themselves.
Yeah, they weren't going to kill themselves. But if he gave them the powder to dry, because technically they actually didn't know that it was they didn't know that he had put 2 bags of powder in a barrel and placed it next to the fire. He didn't tell anybody because he's like, well,
Well, again, this works as a conspiracy.
Yes,
but
the whole point was fire will dry the damp.
Yeah. So it doesn't do anything. It just lights the powder on fire. They don't have as much ammunition as they need.
Well, it's not just that, but they actually some guys do get. There's one guy who actually does go blind, and some of them do take that as an actual sign
they
that
also all die.
Yeah.
They
literally almost die. And one of the guys does go blind, and some of the guys take that as a belief that God is not with us. He's clearly saying you messed up.
Yeah. So 3 days later, on November the 8th, William Wade with a posse of soldiers arrives at the Holbeck House. There's a shootout. Everyone dies.
Yeah.
Actually, Cecil gave orders that he wanted Percy and Catesby taken alive.
Yep.
But Catesby gets killed in the fighting.
Yeah.
And so does, I believe his cousin survives, Wintour.
Yep.
He survives. Percy, I think, dies.
Well, they both die, actually, from the same shot, technically.
Yes.
Or,
so it says.
So, according to the story...
Again, we'll get into the conspiracies once the
storyline. According to the story, though, they actually get taken out by the same gunman, and he's actually given a pension for the rest of his life because of that.
Yeah.
And in typical, Catholic tradition, they actually die in a very... Percy and Catesby die in dramatic fashion, and one of them actually crawls to the statue of Mary, and essentially he does the sign of the cross because he's literally about to die, and he wants to profess his faith one last time, and dies literally at her feet.
Well, and that's because this is we try to that is a legend. We're not sure if that actually she was found beneath the statue of Mary.
Yes,
but it's not known if he actually did that.
Yeah,
that might have just been something to martyr him.
Well, it's one of those things where during that whole time period, after the plot was discovered and it was widely made known of, everybody embellished certain.
Oh
bits.
yeah, well that's
some bits say that the roof of the house that they were in when the barrel went off completely blew off.
Yeah.
But if that had happened, clearly they probably would.
Well, that's even like stuff like with William Wallace, like he was like a 7'2" guy. He would rip guys' heads off with his bed. It's all embellishment. But so pretty much what happens later on, those who surviving conspirators are brought to London. They're all found guilty, and Garnet is also arrested. Henry Garnet.
Yep.
Even though it's proven he had nothing to do with anything.
And not only that, but he actually I
think he surrendered.
He hid. I actually had watched a documentary on the house that he hid in, and it was actually pretty cool. It's funny because he actually actively tried to stop the whole entire plot from happening because he could think rationally and realize, and it was one of the same things when they actually Catesby and Percy, they actually when they found out that the plot didn't really work. They did try to salvage it by just going throughout the whole entire North saying, hey, the king is dead, the king is dead. The Catholics killed the king. Yeah. The problem is that he was hoping that the Catholics would rise up and fight. The problem is
you're in an 85% Protestant country.
And you just found out that like a fanatic
Catholic just killed the king.
Yeah, the smartest thing to do is to do nothing because, my head is now going to be on a pike.
Yeah. So, pretty much what happens is the remaining conspirators are brought to London where they will be hung, drawn, and quartered.
Yep.
So now, I know, and it would happen in that order. Now, that sounds weird because, isn't hanging killing? No, hanging is pretty much, they would hang you.
Snap your neck.
Yeah.
Mess you up, and essentially... So, and if it didn't actually snap your neck, so there's different instances of how the hanging would work because they truly didn't really master killing people. I mean... Well,
the English did the single loop.
Yeah, they did the single loop.
Actually, the United States, we're the ones that perfected it.
Yeah.
Because we're the ones that made the rings.
America perfecting death.
We're sick. But
yeah, you would literally essentially strangle. Most of the time, you would just choke and strangle to death, which is why when you actually look at a lot of historical things... People who get hung, they never really died from that, and
and it's funny because that whole phrase "you're pulling my leg" actually comes from hanging.
Because you would literally have a guy just grab the legs and
pull you down, so you'd snap your neck.
Yeah.
But Guy Fawkes actually, they walked him up, which he was in immeasurable.
Oh yeah, no. At this point, he was being tortured for over a year.
Yeah, he was suffering,
and so he actually needed help to walk up on the platform, and the executioner helped him up, literally like an old man, and they had to actually give him a barrel because he couldn't do it.
Yeah, he was struggling so bad,
and once he got up on the barrel,
he just jumped.
So the one of the aspects of the story is that he jumps. I honestly think it was probably a mix of both.
Well, he probably didn't want to go through the pain, but also he probably was too weak. He probably stumbled.
He probably stumbled and just fell and killed himself by accident.
They talk about that he was laughing while he did it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you're a soldier and you know you're going to die anyway, regardless of the pain, you're getting one last chuckle in because you're like, you're not getting me. So
yeah.
And... they ended up drawing and quartering him anyway. They would slice him open, but he was already dead.
Yeah. So one of the methods of how you would get killed back in the day was you would be hung until just close to death, and then you would be cut down, and then you'd be hacked to bits, and then your bits would be then put on pikes and strung about so that people know their lesson. Don't do it again.
Well, famously with William Wallace, they put his head on London Bridge and his limbs to the four corners of England.
Yep.
Well, they did a similar thing with the conspirators. Even Catesby got his head cut off. Yep. His dead body got desecrated and they cut his head off. And they posted their heads, I think, on Tower Bridge. Not Tower Bridge didn't exist yet.
No.
I think it was just the Tower of London. They might have done it.
I think it was the Tower of London.
Yeah, they literally just cut all their heads off. Because the reason it's called hang, draw, and quartered, you were hanged until almost death. Then they throw you in the ground, slice you open from your sternum to your waist, and start ripping organs out. And then finally, when you either confessed or you were about to die, that's when they would quarter you, which was cut your limbs off one by one so you felt it, and then cut your head off. Which, England, the most civilized country, right? But so, at this point now, this is where we come to the end. Parliament opens. James reigns for... James actually had a pretty long reign. 1603 to 1625. Obviously, his reign of Scotland was longer, 1567 to 1625, because he took power after his mother died, as he had a regency under his...
Yep.
I forgot what his regent was. I don't care, to be honest. But so he has a very long term, and then his son Charles I succeeds him, who Charles, ironically, suffers because of his father's actions in a way, because of the bomb plot, you have the Puritans of England believing the Anglican Church is a little too light on the Catholics. Because again, the Catholics, of course, do suffer after the bomb plot.
They suffer a lot worse.
But the Puritans and people like Oliver Cromwell believe they should have suffered worse because they think what they did was so outrageous. But that's pretty much the beginning to end of the Gunpowder Plot, 1605. It's celebrated in the United Kingdom today as Guy Fawkes Night, which is on Sunday.
And you light bonfires because at the time, bonfires was essentially a way of celebration and communication with other villages, because not everybody had a horse, and the easiest way to say, hey, something happened, is light a bonfire.
The best way to describe Guy Fawkes Night in England, for those in the United States or in other countries, it's in the United States, it's the 4th of July. In France, it's Bastille Day. In Russia, it's Victory Day. It's their big yearly celebration with fireworks, parties, things like that. Yeah. And it starts with burning it. They march through the streets with an effigy of Guy Fawkes, and then they burn him, and then that's when the party begins.
It's in many ways, it is a very fun and similar party. As
I have a family that goes to it, which is ironic because we're Catholics. I got a fight with one of my family members that live in England. They're like, I know what Guy Fawkes Night is. I'm like, yeah, but you're a Catholic. He's a Catholic. And
it's ironic.
And they're like, well...
Guy Fawkes would literally be turning in his grave if he could.
Well, the best part is they're like, oh, well, he tried to kill Parliament. Okay, why did he try to kill Parliament? Because he was a terrorist? Okay, but terrorists have reasons behind... Not trying to make it sound like what he did was okay.
Oh, yeah, no.
But terrorists have reasons behind why they're doing what they're doing. So why did he feel he had to do it? And they just go quiet and like, I guess you know everything. And I'm like, he was a Catholic. That's what this is. When you boil down the bomb plot, it's because they were all Catholics.
Literally the reason.
But, now that we got the whole thing done, we can talk about Cecil.
Yes.
Cecil, I think, was the agent provocateur.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Hands down. So
I think he was.
One of the big things, one of the big actual actors in this whole entire thing was Robert Cecil.
He knew everything going on.
Oh, yeah. So one of the big things that people go is Guy Fawkes was a very key aspect because he was unknown to many parts and many people in London. And what many people don't realize is London back then probably only had 50,000 to 40,000 people.
Yeah, not that many.
It was not a big city. Literally, what's funny is at the same time, I believe in the New World, you had cities that were hundreds of thousands.
Well, New York City alone.
Yeah.
That was also because of how the Dutch built things.
Yeah.
Like me and Trinity talked about last week.
I'm also talking about like the Aztecs and the Incans. And
the Tenochtitlan in Mexico was bigger than I think almost every capital in Europe
for years until
they were huge.
Era. But yeah, no. Going back to it though, one of the key aspects that Guy Fawkes was crucial was no one knows who this guy is, but the problem is that I think that they overlook all the time is, he was unknown, but how unknown, and on top of that, he met with people who were previous conspirators and of avid and known recusants and actual like Catholics who they had taken, some of them had taken and had family members who had taken part in the Essex Rebellion, who was only like I think not even 10 years earlier, or actually I think it was 1601 maybe.
That's literally less than 4
years. 1601, and this had taken place literally in 1606. So this was 5 years afterwards, and it's like these guys are still relatively known like terrorists.
And the leader of the Queen Elizabeth faction was Robert Cecil.
Yeah, and he during both times, the statesman was essentially Robert Cecil, who was essentially the spy master for Elizabeth I.
He's literally like Peter Baelish and Varys as one character. And he's literally the same guy.
For those of you who love Game of Thrones, he is literally the same person as Peter Baelish and Varys, minus or like on top of that, you know, he's crippled and he's kind of, you know,
let's just add to both series. He's Littlefinger, Varys, and what's his name? Strong.
Yeah,
like what the frig is his name? The Beetle, whatever the frig his name is.
Oh,
the new Littlefinger.
Yeah, the new Littlefinger
with the feet.
Yeah, no, he actually, yes, very much the same as that. He's a very weird, and
it would not shock me if Larys, that's his name. Larys. Yes. Oh yeah, because it's Littlefinger and Varys combined.
Yes.
Larys Strong. It would not shock me to find out Larys Strong is based on Robert Cecil.
I wouldn't.
It would not shock me at all.
But no. Essentially, he's a conniving mastermind who is an excellent spy master, and I mean his father was a fantastic spy master who helped keep Elizabeth alive for his whole entire.
Well, he
tenure.
Ran her government.
And yeah,
he was a huge part of that.
And he was a genius unto himself. And Robert, he had recognized all the smart and great traits of himself in his son and saw even better potential. Hence the reason why he essentially gave that job to his son, even though he was the youngest. Generally, you would give it to the oldest, and because the oldest would take over, and he realized, no, the youngest in this case is the best choice and option.
Thomas was much more of a lord.
Oh yeah.
Whereas Robert was much more of a politician.
Yeah.
This is because this is borderlining on the Enlightenment, this era. So this is when you're starting to see more politicians coming forward.
Well, it's not just that,
lords.
but so at the time, Elizabeth had chosen essentially the gentry, not so much just the gentry, but she had chosen people who were smart and not just lords, which actually upset and helped cause more division in her actual kingdom, and is one of the reasons why some of the plotters tried to kill her.
Because if you think about it, that's a very Catholic notion.
Yes.
Because if you look at the other monarchs of Europe, because even look at a state like Prussia, Prussia, which became a Lutheran country, they were soldiers. Yep. None of them were lords. None of them were monarchs. The first king of Prussia, well, king in Prussia, because you know that whole BS. But the first king in Prussia was the Lord Marshal of the Teutonic Order. He was not a lord. He was he had the title Lord Marshal, but he was an elected general pretty much.
Yeah,
and that's where the House of Hohenzollern comes from. And the Prussians have always been more of a meritocratic
which
government.
Is why in many aspects their army has done
always been better, because it's always been a merit-based army.
Yes.
But now let's fast forward to France. That's a very aristocratic military.
Yep.
Like you'll get some good generals like Rochambeau, Napoleon. Napoleon technically he's a weird spot, but we're going to talk about that in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
but Rochambeau, Lafayette, you got all these other guys who they're aristocrats and they're good commanders,
but they're one-offs.
Yeah,
they're not
actual nobility.
They are the exception, not the rule. Whereas Prussia and meritocracy-based societies, it was the rule, not the exception.
And honestly, you want to look at aristocracy being horrible commanders compared to meritocratic commanders. Look at Russia during World War I.
Yes.
The Tsar made his great uncle the commander of the Russian army, and they were getting their butts kicked.
Yeah, which not the smartest thing to do.
Just because you're old and in a position of strength doesn't mean you're a good commander. Because Hindenburg knew how to fight war because he had been a private since 1870, and he rose up the ranks through meritocracy.
Yep.
Now, of course, these guys were given titles later in life for the service they did, But at the same time, they started from nothing and rose up. And that's something I think Elizabeth was bringing in. But that's something, again, Catholic or Orthodox kingdoms don't like that because they believe the aristocracy is chosen by God and they should be the ones running things.
Yep. But yeah, so essentially you have a person who is insanely smart, and one of the key actual aspects to the whole entire situation is Guy Fawkes would have been known by
him,
by Robert Cecil, and not only that, but you have they're meeting together, and what a lot of people don't realize is Guy Fawkes he's not like so. If you want to have a good spy, is someone who doesn't stand out, someone who blends in with the crowd. Unlike a lot of people realizing, Guy Fawkes was actually like tall, and he was unusually tall, and he was a redhead.
Yeah, that's something I always found funny about like the depictions of Guy Fawkes, like V for Vendetta. He has like all the black facial hair.
I can understand him possibly dyeing his hair.
Well, he didn't,
but the problem is he didn't. And on top of that, this is an era where people who are generally 5'6" to 5.
Yeah, wasn't he like 6?
Yeah, he was 6 foot. I think he was. He was actually quite tall.
Yeah, well, he was tall. You know, the depictions we see of Guy Fawkes, the best depiction of Guy Fawkes is actually in the intro to V for Vendetta when they're showing his story, because the depiction the English made for him after he died is. He looks like the devil, is actually the best way to put it. He has these black, sharp mustache, sharp goatee. His hair is like night black. He was actually a redhead. Yeah. He was very fair-skinned. Like, he probably had rough skin because he was in the army.
He was a... I don't think they actually have his height, but he...
He was a tall guy, though.
He was... his view was he was a tall... I just had it, unfortunately. He was a tall man with reddish-brown hair. And... here we go. Tall, powerfully built man with thick reddish-brown hair and a flowing mustache, which was traditional at the time.
Yeah, which everyone had that.
Yeah.
But, again, the depictions we see of him, because of, like, everything, is he looks like the devil. You know, everything's trimmed and sharp and everything. Like, even the V for Vendetta mask that's nothing what he actually looked like. That's just because it was easier to propagandize him as a demon than to show what he really looked like.
Yep.
Because even, like, he has the pointy nose. From what I've understood, he had a very round nose as well. Because he was from Northern England. He wasn't from, like, you know, they were giving him a lot of sharp European features, but he didn't look that way. Because it was easier to demonize him than it was to show his real look. And I've always found that as an interesting aspect of Guy Fawkes. But, you know, it's so funny. Cecil did have those sharp facial hair. You know, the sharp mustache and the goatee and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Which is kind of funny because it's like, he's like, make him look like me. But my lord, why? Because I know I look pretty devious.
But yeah. Yeah, no, he is a... Robert Cecil... I can almost guarantee you that Robert Cecil knew of them way longer than many people thought.
You know, I've been saying all week because we've been, like... Because when I told you we're doing this... you and I started watching documentaries and everything, because this is our only scripted, like, this is the only one that we prepared for. Because usually I like doing it organic, you know. This is the first time we've ever actually prepared for a podcast.
I mean, to be fair, I've watched many documentaries, I've read many books on Guy Fawkes, and it's not even just so much that, it's the Gunpowder Plots, because...
Well, it's fascinating.
It's fascinating, because this is actually one of the... I think this is one of the first terroristic acts on British territory against the government.
I think it is the first. It's the first against the British government.
And if it had succeeded, it would have been literally it would have been 9/11, Pearl Harbor mixed for Great Britain.
Proportionately, it would have been devastating because, like we said, it wouldn't even just be because of the killing of the government. It would have been the residual damage it would have done. Yeah. 36,
and not only,
it's a lot of powder.
Yeah, and on top of that, killing the king, there's always backups, and unfortunately there's always backups to everything. But there's
the heir and a spare.
There's heirs. Granted, I mean he had most of his kids and family with him, but there's other heirs, there's other people that you can try and get. They probably would have ended up having to go to France and getting someone from there, or someone from Scotland.
Probably Scot or German. They wouldn't have gone for a French because they're Catholics.
True, but at the same time, they could have gotten someone.
Well, it's very.
The problem is this plot would have killed so many, and like I said earlier, James had expanded the bureaucracy. And so the House of Commons and House of Lords had grown exponentially. And then on top of that, you had commoners who would have been there, like Francis Bacon, who
had nothing to do with...
And not only that, but he was trying to essentially work his way into becoming into the House of Lords, which I can't remember.
I think he did.
I'm
pretty sure he did.
And others who would eventually have become lords and or part of the Commons.
Yeah, he actually became Lord High Chancellor.
Yeah.
First Viscount St. Alban.
And so you would have changed dramatically the whole entire outcome of history for the country. Honestly, if it had succeeded, they probably would have been a second world country for a long time. And
they would have, I think, gone right into a military dictatorship because you're in this situation because let's put in this scenario. Cecil might have been there.
Yeah.
Cecil was a high counselor, so he probably would have been there. And we're putting in this scenario that he doesn't know what's going on, which, again, you and me, I think, have both pretty much agree that he probably was more involved than most of us realize.
Yes.
But you have the entire cabinet taken out, but then you have someone like Sir William Wade, who's the governor of the Tower, lieutenant of the Tower, which is also a title that Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington, held at one point. You have him now, who's across the Thames at the Tower of London, who... Honestly, you could describe him kind of like a mad dog.
Yeah.
Because Cecil held him on a leash. You just had the entire government wiped out. The highest government official now in London is in the Tower of London with an army with him who...
And not only that, but you're hearing rumors up north that Catholics are now in an upstate of rebellion. Well, the first thing that he's going to assume is it was the Catholics, which, I mean, to be fair...
And he's going to wipe them out.
Yeah, he's going to just purge. It would have been, honestly, it probably would have been worse than the, I'm trying to remember the Inquisition.
Oh, the Inquisition's going on while this is going on.
Yeah, it would have been 10 times worse than the Inquisition. It would have been, if you even harbor any, neutral feelings about Catholics, you would have been purged, your family would have been wiped out.
It definitely was more favorable to Catholics that James survived. Because, yes, he did hit them with laws, and yes, he did do things, but in a situation that it succeeded, I do not see any path that Catholics were coming out in any way.
The best thing that they could have done if this had succeeded would have been if all Catholics had just left the country. Because, honestly, at that point, they would have been guaranteed death sentences.
Yeah, because, again, you're facing... And, again, you're not only thinking about England. James is also the head of state for Scotland.
Yeah. And Englishmen taking out the Scottish king is not a best thing.
You're going to have every Scottish levy raised and marching south.
And on top of that, the Scottish Catholics are going to kind of be annoyed and upset at you because you just took out their king.
Well, again, because the laws are different in Scotland.
That's the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the normal man didn't really care. For the most part, they actually enjoyed their monarchs because James I was actually a very peaceful transfer of power. Most times when a monarch dies like Elizabeth, it is a bloody chaos.
Yeah, because there's a power vacuum.
And Robert Cecil actually had negotiated and managed to keep a very peaceful transition of power, which is why most people were like, no, this is good. We need to keep the king alive because everything went smoothly. And their mentality is, everything went smoothly, and I don't want to know what causes chaos tomorrow, because the whole premise at the time was, hey, we have peace, we have food, we're alive, let's not threaten that and introduce chaos. Because, yes, we could have freedom, but I'd rather be alive with food in my belly and a stable world than chaos where, eventually, maybe down the line, after I lose majority of my family, I might have freedom.
Yeah. No, this, but, you and I were saying, this honestly we can expand into so much because of this. Because,
Oh, yeah.
like I said before, James's reaction to the majority of English, they enjoyed.
Yeah.
They liked it. But then you had that small sect of the Puritans who were like, what the frig?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, look what they did. They tried to murder you, and now you're just going to let them get away with it? Why aren't you enacting harder laws on them? Yeah. And then, James passes away in... When did he die? James dies in March of 1625, and his son, Charles, takes over. Now, Charles, much like his father, marries a Catholic.
Yep.
But it's not like a random Catholic like his father, which I don't think she was a random Catholic either, but this is Henrietta of France. It's the King of France's sister.
Yeah.
I mean, daughter. Well, it's Louis the 13th's sister.
Yes.
And it's kind of funny because that makes Charles II, and Louis the 14th cousins.
Yeah.
But so Charles marries Henrietta. This enrages the Puritans.
Yeah.
And not only that, Charles bans Parliament.
Yes.
For 12 years. And it's called the self-govern. It's when he rules England by himself. He rules off taxes from hunting and things like that.
Which a lot of people, if you don't realize this, the Parliament was essentially
personal rule. Sorry, that's what it was called. The
Parliament essentially ruled with the king because certain aspects the king can't do by himself, and also on top of the fact is that it gave every man and the common man a chance to actually have a say in the rulings of the realm.
This goes back to Magna Carta.
Yes.
It's the king can't control everything. The king needs the consent of the people.
It literally was handcuffs on the king because the king, you don't want absolute power because
it absolutely corrupts.
Yes, and also you don't know where at the end of the day if we're going to be in a stable situation. Whereas at least with Parliament, it's hey, these are the rules, we got to follow.
And look what happened to France with the States General. They have a States General for something like 500 years or something. No, maybe it was like 100 years. 500 might be a little extreme.
Yeah, I was gonna say
it was like 100 years because I think it was right before Louis the 14th was the last States General. Yeah, look that up for me. But look what happened there. They didn't have an Estates General in so long, and then finally when the king, after ruling like an idiot, was asking for money, they're like, well, you need to give us some concessions because we are struggling as the normal people. And, Charles did the same thing, but then, he was ruling through tariffs.
Actually, it might have been 500 years.
Really?
Well, I'm seeing I believe it was the first one was in 1302.
Whoa.
And then I believe in the mid-16th century.
Wow.
Or looks like 1484 possibly.
It's pretty impressive that I guess that.
And then the revival was in 1560 to 1614. So I mean, couple hundred years of worth of
just absolute rule.
Yeah.
That's what they call the Ancien Regime, when the Bourbons just ruled without question. But look what happened when they finally needed the consent of the people. The people were like, "No, are you insane?" They're like, "We need these concessions. You have been telling us what to do this entire time. You muddied it up. We want a National Assembly that makes the choices." And then, now we're going back to Napoleon.
Yeah.
But back to Charles, he recalls Parliament because he wants a war with the Scottish rebels. Because, again, Charles is king of Scotland and England and Ireland.
Yeah. And technically, I mean, he's more king of Scotland than he is of England and Ireland. But,
yeah.
And it's his father's homeland. So
well, I think he actually spoke with a Scottish accent, too. Charles.
Remember.
Probably. I think he spent more of his life in Scotland than he did in England. But, so, Charles had already wasted the army in Ireland, because that's where they were putting down another uprising,
Yep.
We're winning. But, we didn't win. But, so, he needed to raise another army to fight the Scottish marching on England. And this is what sets off the English Civil War. You have Manchester, Essex, and Fairfax raise the parliamentarian army, and that's where you have Oliver Cromwell rise up and kill the king.
Yep.
And this was all because the Puritans were like, you have not asked for our help, and every time we give you your advice, you tell us we're wrong. and you need to start listening to us. And Charles is like, I understand that, but we need to deal with this. But they're like, no, you need to deal with this because look at everything that happened under your father. Do you want that to repeat now? And lost him his head.
Yep.
But, you know, the bomb plot, it has a ripple effect through history because Catholics didn't really start getting treated well by England until the First World War.
Yeah.
If you really think about it.
And even then, if you look at it, it was still kind of iffy because I'm trying to remember.
Well, look at the famine.
I know. And even honestly, probably even after World War One or World War Two, because World War Two, I mean, Ireland was for the most part neutral, and
well, Ireland was neutral except for the north.
Yeah, and you have a Catholic majority country, and it's like, hey, why aren't you helping? It's like,
well, and before we have the people
I'm
just going to specify this before people attack us. The landmass of Ireland, Hibernia, if you will, is majority Catholic. Northern Ireland is majority Protestant, but that is because of British colonialism
and also
Scottish colonialism too.
And if you want to look into it, possibly also it's a little bit of prima nocta where it's like,
well, yeah. But again, this goes into the whole idea that what happened to Ireland was genocide. But you know, this effect has stayed true because you know that the Huguenots. From, you know, back to that, the Huguenots that Louis XIV chased out, a lot of them found safety in England or they found safety in the German states.
Yeah.
You know, the religious wars, England was bankrolling Gustavus Adolphus and his war, and ironically, so was France, which is very strange.
It's one of those things that I think it's actually quite amusing sometimes, the European wars. It's who's on what side and who's on the other side.
And why are they on those sides?
And why are those on those sides? Because many wars, it's like, oh yeah, it's Protestant versus Catholic, but their allies are Catholics, and then Protestant. It's like, but your two allies, like two of your major allies are Catholics, and you're Protestant. It's like, yes, but they have to be our allies because they're in this alliance with us.
Well, you know, it's so funny you say that because I'm playing Empire Total War right now, and I'm playing as France. It's actually a really hard campaign to play as the French.
It is.
Because you only have 2 territories in Europe. But so you know me, I'm a pretty good, and my 2 biggest allies right now are Prussia and England,
who are both Protestants.
Pro-Protestant nations. I'm a French country,
yeah,
and of course I have Spain as my ally. But my biggest enemy is actually Austria and the Papal States. One which is a Catholic country, and the other which is the capital of Catholicism. So yes. It's true though, but that's how it did work. It's what deal could I get better with these guys that my faction is not giving me?
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's actually quite amusing, and I think it's one of the reasons why for many years America always stayed at like.
Well, because we're
mixed, and it's not even just that. It's the fact is that we stayed out of it because it was so confusing, and it didn't really help us or advance us because you'd have literally a fourth of the country siding with one side, a fourth of the country siding with the other side, and
even places like Germany, you know, during German unification when Prussia became the superstate, you had a lot of Bavarians and Württembergers and Rhinelanders that fled because they were Catholics, and they're like, Prussia's a Lutheran state, they're not going to treat us well.
Yeah.
So they fled, which of course Bismarck didn't really care.
Yeah.
The guy had 10 million other things going on. But, you know, we see that to this day with stuff like that, you know.
But yeah, getting back to it, though.
Yeah.
No, I'm a firm believer in the conspiracy camp that Robert Cecil, honestly, he probably also... I actually have this one theory that Robert Cecil is actually the reason why the whole plot began in the first place. Because he actually had jailed... all these guys.
Except for Fawkes.
He had either jailed or he knew of them completely. And when they were released, he was probably like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get them to come together to do a plot, stop the plot, and then I will have my excuse to essentially stamp out the Catholic fanatics and rebels.
Well, if you think about it.
And also he could probably catch the Jesuits at the same time.
But if you also think about it, the plot happened before the treaty with Spain was signed.
Yes.
So technically, they were still in a state of war with Spain. So this could be looked on to as they were conspiring with the Spanish.
Yep. And in many instances you could say so, because you have a Spanish soldier in Guy Fawkes.
Yeah, a man who
literally
admits to fighting with Spain
and was in the army.
Yeah, that's that's why I honestly agree with you that I think he was an agent provocateur.
And not only was he in the army, and it would have been an easy sell. Is Guy Fawkes? Yes, his English name was Guy Fawkes, but he actually went under the name Guido Fawkes. If you actually look at his signature, it's Guido Fawkes. It's not Guy Fawkes.
Well, his signature is also...
Well, no.
His signature is also pretty bad because he was tortured so much.
But
you're right. It does say Guido Fawkes.
But even before that though, it's Guido Fawkes. It's not Guy Fawkes. It's Guido Fawkes, because he essentially had. Yes, he was English, but he essentially said, England is not a Catholic country. Therefore, I am no longer really English. I'm more Spanish. And he essentially, he was English, but he essentially was, I am a Catholic man.
Well, it's the mentality of I'm a Catholic before my nation.
Yes.
Which is the opposite of how England was, because Henry and Elizabeth, it was you're English before your religion.
Yes.
Which is kind of the whole idea of the Reformation.
Yeah. And so it was an easy sell to say, hey, this guy's a Spanish mercenary who clearly was sent here by Spain as a liaison to help try and do this bomb plot. And after the treaty, sure, we don't have to worry about the Spanish plot.
Well, there's also a theory that the Spanish helped Cecil. That the Spanish were actually the ones who said, it's going to be a bomb plot. We don't know how they're going to do it, but it's going to be a bomb plot.
And that is one of those things where, because the way that the letter actually got sent to, I'm trying to remember his name. I think it was what? Oh, his name is, I had it just a second ago.
Monteagle?
Yes, Monteagle. The letter that it was actually given to his servant, who was accosted by a random stranger, and it would have made no sense to actually have. So the theory that is that the letter was sent by one of the 13 conspirators, but the person who would have sent the letter, it made no sense, because he could have just told him, hey, want to go on a hunting trip with me? And he could have just convinced him to not go, because it wouldn't have been that difficult to convince him. But no, he actually the actual my conspiracy is that the man who accosted his servant was clearly a spy working for Cecil, and Cecil was just trying to get the jump on them, and so that way he could kind of go, okay, hey, there's a plot, and that way he could kind of he could stop it through a good means, and he could also at the same time cause disruption amongst the conspirators and see if they either spread out or try and see who else they try and contact, because the premise was, okay, they're probably going to drop the plot and do a different one or do something differently, but they were adamant about continuing the plot.
Well, I think he was more upset than anyone that Parliament's date got changed, because I think he probably had everything he needed to do what he needed to do, but the fact that the dates got changed, then you have this situation that Catesby and Wintour and all them go to the north, and now it's like, I had all my eggs in a basket, I could have just grabbed them all at once, now I can't because they're all in the north.
And not only that, but like I was saying earlier, 36 barrels, so having a barrel of gunpowder back in the day was very like strange. Because unless you were a merchant gunship or a merchant marine or something of the sort,
in the military in some.
If you were not a merchant or if you were not in the military, then there would be no reason for you to have that much gunpowder. And to have 36, that raises a lot of red flags.
Well, and the saying is history is written by the victors.
Yeah. And he was infamous for being a propaganda master.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like,
because he actually, what a lot of people don't realize is Robert Cecil actually wrote a lot of the history books that influenced the modern history books.
Yeah.
And what people didn't realize is like, oh, this is clearly written with a more favorable view to him. Yes, because he wrote it.
Well, and that's the thing, because if you think about it, you know, when on the Richard Hammond thing, they make it look like it's nothing. That, you know, Guy Fawkes and these guys just went to the gunpowder place, collected gunpowder, and left.
Yeah.
You don't think that's raising any eyebrows? Oh, it wouldn't, because the war was ending, so they had an overflow of gunpowder.
They had the overflow that they were trying to get rid of, but...
That sounds like a convenient excuse. More so, it sounds like maybe this guy was like, let them buy it, don't question it, I know they're doing it, I work for the king, do what I tell you, and the gunpowder manufacturers were like, okay, we'll do what you tell us.
Or not even just that, but it was probably like Robert Cecil it was probably his contact, and he was probably like, he was probably like, hey, these guys want like a lot of gunpowder. And he was probably like, oh, okay, I see what they're going to try and do. And so he gave them it, wrote the letter, because he's like, oh, there's going to be a parliament, and the king is going to suffer a major blow.
Yeah. Well, and also, it's pretty believed that first of all, the Cecils were completely involved in his mother's execution.
Oh, yes. That's the
of
other
Mary,
thing
Queen
that
of Scots.
Many people forget as well.
He was 100% involved in that. I think he's one of the signatories on her death certificate behind Elizabeth. But not only that, it's strongly believed he was also involved in James's father's death. So you have the situation that this guy, which, dude, this is what I mean about this guy being insane. Like, guy, and
but he's also very smart, though, because
he knows how to protect himself.
Yeah, and on top of that, he also granted, I think that James wouldn't have been like as upset with Cecil, because he did help lead to a peaceful transfer of power.
I don't think James had any idea, though, that Cecil was involved. I think he knew with his mother, because he denounced his mother. James denounced his mother, but I don't think he knew with the father.
Yeah, no, and on top of that, I think Cecil played it off perfectly, because he, like I said, he didn't understand what the letter meant. Clearly, I mean, to everybody who has any inkling of a brain, we all knew that he knew definitely what the letter meant.
Oh yeah,
and he was just trying to curry favor and play to the king's whims, because the king actually did also love the puzzles, and the king loved to solve things and make him feel smart.
Oh, he knew exactly how to play everyone.
Oh yeah.
This is what makes this guy so fascinating, and honestly, I might do a video on Cecil alone, because he is a fascinating character.
Yes.
But
fun fact, he was actually called Elizabeth. Her nickname for him was her pygmy.
Yeah.
Because he had scoliosis and he was only 5'4".
So and I think James's was my little beagle.
Yes, it was.
But his enemies, do you know what they referred to him as?
Not pretty names.
Well, do you know the big one they used to call him?
What?
The Spider.
Yeah, I can see that.
But he was a clever guy, and that's why I honestly, when you brought that up to me a few days ago about, thinking, like, saying this guy probably was more involved than we think, I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, no, honestly, he probably... I was like, it would not shock me, because at the same time, if you really want to boil it down, he was the one pushing for all these laws against the Catholics.
Oh, yeah. He helped push a major attack against them. And then...
That in itself is provoking.
Yeah. Because,
again, these people... James comes to power, and everything's slowly getting chilled. And, they're living happy, and he's like, nope.
Granted, I will say that because of James's ambition to try and unify, it was also causing disruptions, and I think that irritated Cecil, and he needed the king to get back on track, and he also needed the king to kind of like play more favorably with him, and to also try and crack down, because
yes, I agree. I think. But again, this goes into this whole idea. I think Cecil, and it's so funny because the main, like, if you want to say the leaders in this plot were Guido Fawkes, Catesby, Percy, Wintour, but really, Cecil is a very big component of all of this.
Oh yeah,
because Cecil served under Elizabeth, who all these guys were suffering under originally, and then they thought they got an ace in the hole with James, but the second he got to England. Because, again, James is Scottish, so he doesn't really know the customs and culture and everything, which he probably knew enough, but he didn't know how to govern the English compared to the Scottish. And now you have the situation that you have this guy who knows everything, and you've denounced your mother, and this guy was involved in her execution, so you're like, okay, this guy has the best interests of England at heart, so I will let him run things the way I let my Scottish courtiers run Scotland. And again, the guy might have been one of the more intelligent people on the continent at the time. Yeah. So the guy knew how to play the game. He
also did a lot of favors for James I. There's actually
James I was also homosexual.
Yeah,
and but he covered it.
Well, that, and also on top of that, there was many times when there was one house that he actually ended up trading to the king for, and a lot of people actually complained about, because they're like, oh, he's just trying to milk the king for all the money. And it's like, he actually, if you looked at the facts, he didn't really actually make any money on that deal, because his father actually had given Cecil a beautiful house in near Westminster, and actually in London, and it made it easier for him to work there in London, and also it made it easier, and the king loved that house.
This is what makes Cecil also such a fascinating character. What did he actually want? Because it's crazy to, we're talking about him, we compare him to people like Littlefinger and Varys, and all these guys, which Varys not so much, but Littlefinger, these guys who are filled with self-ambition.
Oh yeah.
What did Cecil was more like actually Varys, in the fact that he legitimately just was a very good servant. He wanted to serve the king and queen, which, as someone looking at history, I can appreciate that he wasn't this ambitious guy that was trying to take over England or anything.
Oh, yeah.
But as a Catholic, I hate him because of what he did to Catholics. But it's very interesting seeing a guy as intelligent as him, because that's the thing. Who's more powerful, the Sultan or the Vizier?
Yeah. And on top of that, he also was a true Renaissance man, if you actually look at.
Oh, he was very cultured.
Because so he was the Lord Treasurer, and under Queen Elizabeth, he actually helped bring in the entertainment industry to help ease the people, to essentially, keep everybody's minds numb and away from, bad situations. Yeah. And also, he utilized it as a heavy propaganda piece.
Well, if you think about it, the only reason he was angry with Shakespeare is because Shakespeare was criticizing him.
Yeah. And on top of that, he one of the people who, if you looked in the conspiracy theory of Shakespeare, the DeVoes and some of them, he actually is the reason why he tried to actually go after them, and that
doesn't shock me in the least.
And that's one of the reasons why I think Richard III is such a key, completely a character devised almost completely after him. And
well, because he was so sinister in that aspect, because you want to talk about the princes in the towers. That is something I can 100% see Cecil doing.
Yeah,
just killing off those children. I don't see him having any issues or regrets about that. And again, but he's not an ambitious man. What's he getting out of this? Okay, this small minorities being abused, but what am I getting out of that?
Yeah,
he sincerely, and that's what is so strange about him, as intelligent as he is. But again, like I said, who's more powerful, the Sultan or the Vizier? He was the man working behind the throne, keeping everything in order and keeping the realm together. But he definitely, I think, did it in heinous ways, because again, if not involved from the beginning, he knew about everything from the beginning, and he let it run its course.
Yeah, but the other thing though is he actually also believed heavy in exile for all the for religious reasons. He wasn't. Sometimes we also have to remember that he was more of a moderate. Which is saying something, because...
Well, that series I was showing you, Gunpowder Plot, there's actually this moment where they're putting the heads on the tower.
Yep.
And he actually looks disgusted looking at it.
Well, he was more of a... He believed more in exile, but at the same time, he was also not stupid, and he understood that, yeah, if we exile them, a majority of the people will never come back, and we won't have to worry about them. The problem is the ones who will try to come back.
I think he was a very Machiavellian in the fact that I think he believed a good way to maintain order was through fear.
Oh yeah, he definitely tried to establish ruling with fear.
Well, it's so interesting because Machiavelli based the Prince on Cesare Borgia, who was Pope Alexander's son, who was a heinous man in himself.
Yeah.
But I could definitely see someone like Cecil reading the Prince and getting a stop, because Machiavelli is the way most people governed, because Machiavelli was seen as a genius, and honestly he was the ambassador of Milan. Where was Machiavelli? He was. Oh my God!
It's been too many years for me. I used to know Machiavelli more, but
I'm just gonna look it up. It's gonna make
it
easier. Florence. The Republic of Florence, which was run by the Medicis.
Yeah.
I actually worked with someone that's descended from the Medicis. But I think Cecil was definitely a Machiavellian figure.
Yeah.
He knew the game, he knew how to play it well, and he knew how to play it from the shadows. Yeah. Because that was his ally, was the shadows. And I think that's why a lot of people called him the Spider, because he knew what his skills were and he didn't publicize it. Even like the Spanish ambassadors and the consuls of Castile knew who Robert Cecil was.
Yeah.
He wasn't like some random bureaucrat like Henry Percy that just was on the king's council. This was This was the man who was the real power behind the throne.
Oh, yeah.
And I think James I knew that, and I think he also feared that to some level. I think he feared Cecil a little bit, which I don't blame him.
Well, I mean, honestly, I love some of the stuff that is written about him. I mean, let's see. During Elizabeth, when she was on her deathbed, Cecil actually told her that. And by the way, if you openly tell a monarch that they need to go to bed, that's a bold statement. And even if they're ill and you say it from the bottom of your heart,
that is pretty bold. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, and so she actually snapped at him and said, "Little man, is not a word to use to your princes. Your father were here; he durst never speak to me so. But you know that I must die, and it makes you presumptuous." And it's funny because he was bold to have to say that, but at the same time, I think he also knew. He was like,
well, what's also probably funny about that, because that makes me think of that incident with Lavrenti Beria, when Stalin was dying, and he was like insulting him while he was dying, and then he made a breath. Stalin took a breath, and he became like a coward.
And he's like, I love you.
Yeah, I don't think Cecil probably cowered down. I think Cecil was probably like...
Well, I mean, he was already cowering because of his scoliosis, but yes.
Well, he was probably like... What was it, like this? Something like that? He was probably like... He's like, I really don't care. He's like, I really don't care. Because again, this is actually one of my favorite scenes in a movie. It's Tim Curry in Three Musketeers, where he's like, kings come and go, but the one thing that remains the same is me.
Yeah.
But that's true. Cecil was that kind of guy too. And I feel like on some level, Dumas probably based Rochefort, because Rochefort was actually a very good guy in real life. And I don't know why they made him such a villain in the Three Musketeers. But I feel like on some level, Cecil was inspiration for that too.
There's a lot of villains in I think a lot of books and plays that are probably based off of Cecil, and some people might not even realize it because
because how many people actually know who Robert Cecil is? Like outside you and I, who are history people,
probably not that many. But like we said earlier, Richard III, it's largely based off of Robert Cecil and James I and the whole situation. And how many plays and how many movies and scripts are written that are similar and taken, inspiration from Richard III. And it's clearly, like, there's many aspects that you can clearly go, okay, if you look at it, it's clearly almost similar to a Robert Cecil.
Yeah.
But he's also one of the original inspirations for many villainous roles, because he did everything, and he was
and he wrote the history books,
and he wrote the history books, and like I said, he was influential in the arts because he realized you can propagandize through them easily, and then on top of that, he was a spy master. He made sure that that there was money in the coffers, and he understood that to try and get money from people, you had to give and take.
And he was actually one of the lead ambassadors on the deal with Spain.
Yep.
And that's why I love that this was supposed to be about the Gunpowder Plot, but it is, because Cecil played such a heavy hand in it all.
And like I said, I am almost guaranteed, like I firmly am a believer that he knew and or had some heavy hand in it, more so than that we realize, because at the end of the day, all these conspirators were killed, and yes, Catebsy and Percy were supposed to be captured, but that
because they also were one of the more senior of the conspirators.
And like I said, they were previous in another plot. Clearly, they were all well known, and yes, you try and introduce someone who's outside the circle. It doesn't matter if one person is an unknown. If the rest is all extremists, if I'm hanging out with an extremist, I'm instantly going to be on a watch list, regardless if it's like, I'm not an extremist.
And I think to a certain level, he knew what was going on in the Spanish Netherlands. They were fighting a war. It'd be insane to think he didn't have any idea. And I think he probably had a good general guess of who was serving in those armies.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe not.
Not detailed.
But I think for a fact that any foreign soldier that comes back, and it's like, well, we have a couple soldiers that just came back from Spanish Netherlands. It's like, okay, well, just keep an eye on them.
Well, and anyone coming in from the Spanish Netherlands, is being watched.
Yeah.
Because who could they be?
And not only that, but especially if they're meeting with known
conspirators
and extremists, it's like, okay, well, keep an eye on them, and we'll find out.
Well, I have to.
Yeah.
So we're gonna cut this now. This was our episode about the Gunpowder Plot. I think we covered a lot of it.
Oh yeah, I think we definitely.
We went into Cecil very well. Again, this is one of the few times I've actually said, let's do this. Usually I like to have my guest pick, but because Sunday is November the 5th, I thought we should do it this way. Nick, you have anything else to say before we finish?
No. The only thing I can think of is yes, have fun on Guy Fawkes Day. It is coming up soon. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, we're thankful that it didn't actually succeed, because history could have been much more different.
Yes.
I think, honestly, Catholics probably would have been in a much deeper, darker light, and probably worse situation for many, many more centuries.
Absolutely.
But
yeah. So enjoy Guy Fawkes night, everyone. Even here in America, if you want to enjoy it, definitely fire off some fireworks, burn some effigies.
Yep.
Next week, we're going to be having my friend Morgan on. We're going to be discussing Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes. So that's going to be an interesting episode.
That will be interesting.
We're so happy to have you guys, and we will see you in the next one.
See ya.